I would like to thank the hosts for inviting me to participate in the conference.
Strojin, and I am the president of CAHAI, the ad hoc committee on artificial intelligence at the Council of Europe. Obviously, artificial intelligence provides a number of opportunities both for the society and for individuals, and that is both from quantitative as well as qualitative perspectives. Some applications are relatively low risk, but with the rising complexity and effectiveness, we start seeing those which can create higher risks for individuals and the society. Some risks emanate from the design of the system itself, some from the way of how they are used. A very simple example are some of the aspects of COVID-19 tracking applications. Just a couple of days ago, one of our experts, Mrs. Kathleen Miller, published an article on the topic and wrote, and I will quote, "The systems do not determine the health risk level, they only make a prediction. The prediction is likely to be based merely on characteristics that someone happens to share with others. These characteristics could be irrelevant or even wrong, making these predictions biased or incorrect." And that is the end of the quote. But the consequences based on such erroneous predictions can be very real, especially if we succumb too quickly and too naively to techno-solutionism. There are many similar or tangential examples which we could debate on in a similar way. For example, face recognition, criminal recidivism, or social welfare assessment. While governance takes into consideration the opportunities, regulation is required at the same time to address the risks. And if I may remind you of the quote, "Trust is good, control is better." At the same time, we need to prevent control from stifling the innovation. But how do we get there? And I would like to ask the moderators to give us the first slide. A popular approach in the past few years seems to have been to apply ethics. And we have seen a proliferation of hundreds of ethical frameworks with similarly sounding principles, but often with much less agreement on what they might mean in practice, and without clear rules on what to do when they fail to adhere them. A consensus is, however, emerging, including within the private sector, on the need to go beyond ethics and to define a comprehensive legal framework on AI. We need legal certainty and we need binding rules. Uncertainty and lack of trust have a negative effect on demand in the market. They lower willingness to invest and they prevent scalability of solutions. Developers desire predictability and they also want to avoid potential risks. Experiences with various technologies in the past have shown that this is possible to achieve. And tell you a bit about Council of Europe. Council of Europe is an international organization which was founded in 1949, and it is composed of 47 countries with a population of over 830 million. Council of Europe has a long and proven history of dealing with new technologies and their impact on human rights, rule of law, and democracy. Next slide, please. Its conventions have been ratified by many non-member countries as well. In the past, it has created clear, binding, and effective rules also in the fields of pharmaceuticals and biotech. For example, as you can see here, the Convention on European Pharmacopoeia created a system of verification of medical products and procedures already in 1964. And in the 1990s, the Oviedo Convention created a red line by prohibiting human cloning. Similarly, many binding norms already exist within the framework of Council of Europe that can be directly applied to artificial intelligence, notably in the European Convention on Human Rights and in the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, as well as in the specialized instruments such as Convention 108 and the subsequent 108+, which is often referred to as the grandmother of GDPR. Due to the sui generis nature of AI, and due to the novel ways in which it might be applied, however, it seems that relevant standards would best be defined in a new instrument. And this is why CAHAI was established by the Committee of Ministers in September 2019. Next slide, please. CAHAI is an intergovernmental committee which has a mandate to examine the feasibility and potential elements of a legal framework for the development, design, and application of AI applications in order to ensure that they are in line with human rights, rule of law, and democracy. You can see here the picture from our first plenary meeting in November last year in Strasbourg, and you can see that there's actually more than 100 of us. In addition to mapping of risks and opportunities, CAHAI is taking into account the numerous initiatives of AI regulation that have been considered or undertaken globally, in particular by the European Union, that is the European Commission, by the OECD, UNESCO, and the United Nations, also in order to identify already elaborated common values and principles, existing solutions, overlaps, and gaps. We are all faced with common challenges, and we need to provide a coherent response, also in order to prevent the race to the bottom. Each organization has its own mandate, but at the end of the day, our work should be complementary if it is to be efficient. A comprehensive and a well-balanced legal framework should regulate the design, development, and application of specific AI with a view of minimizing and managing risks while stimulating development and use and allowing to reap the benefits and promises. We are examining a full spectrum of options for regulation, and this goes from the lightest soft law instruments to a binding international convention for AI. Can I have the next slide, please? Here we can see the outline of the feasibility study that's currently being debated. The objective is not to regulate technology as such, but to make sure that from the very early stages of design, principles such as transparency, privacy, and so on are embedded in the process of development as well as in the applications, and that their continuously developing dynamic nature is also taken into consideration. CAHAI is looking at the steps which need to be taken to ensure compliance with and the effectiveness of the legal framework. For example, mechanisms of ex-ante verification or validation and certification, oversight by independent authorities. They are of key importance in this respect to ensure accountability of all those involved in AI development chain and subsequent life cycle, as are normative instruments such as regulative sandboxes, which could allow for a limited but state-sanctioned introduction of experimental solutions into production. We will discuss and hopefully adopt the draft feasibility study at our third plenary meeting, which will happen in a couple of weeks on December 15 to 17. This will allow us to move forward with the elaboration of specific legal instruments and to prepare clear recommendations for the Committee of Ministers by the end of 21. Our work is based on a multi-stakeholder approach, and it needs to be understood by the citizens of our member countries in order to achieve legitimacy and acceptance. Can I have the next slide, please? As you could see in the previous picture where you saw all the members from the last plenary, we have a very broad inclusive membership, as we are composed of 47 member countries and also observer countries such as Japan, Israel, Mexico, and Holy See, and a number of other participants such as various intergovernmental bodies and international organizations, representatives of the industry, society, and academia, who all contribute to the ongoing process. And in the first half of 21, consultations of the major stakeholders and within individual countries will strengthen and focus, as we would like to get feedback on the findings of our feasibility study in order to prioritize and fine-tune our work appropriately for the conclusion of our mandate. In this regard, I would like to commend and thank our colleague from the delegation of the Russian Federation, Mr. Andrei Vladimirovich Neznamov, who is co-chairing the consultations and outreach working group, and which is preparing this process. And I would also like to thank the head of the delegation of the Russian Federation, Mrs. Oksana Valerievna Tarasenko, for the constructive support to our work so far. I look forward to our continuous good cooperation in the future. Thank you.